Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this lecture. It's the first lecture in our international speaker series, coinciding with the Kate Derum Award and the Irene Davies Emerging Artist Award for Small Tapestries. How exciting for us all to have this series starting tonight. And thank you to Adrienne and to Antonia and the team at the workshop for their work in setting all of this up. My name is Caroline Johnston, and I'm the convener of the Friends of the Australian Tapestry Workshop. I would like to take a moment first to acknowledge the Boonwurrung and Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land from which I'm zooming in from this evening. I'd also like to pay respect to their elders, past, present, and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians present. To set the backdrop for tonight and to pretend that we possibly could be gathering at the workshop, I have behind me the tapestry called the Royal Harvest, which was at that stage, and the photo was taken, a work in progress, but is now completed and has gone to the Australian Embassy in Indonesia. The tapestry was designed by Naomi Hobson and was woven by our wonderful weavers at the workshop. A little about the awards. The Kate Derum and the Irene Davies Awards for Small Tapestries celebrate creativity and excellence in contemporary tapestry. The Kate Derum Award honours Kate Derum and her significant contribution to tapestry as an artist, weaver, teacher, and is generously supported by Susan Morgan. The Irene Davies Emerging Artist Award for Small Tapestries was established to support early career weavers in the first 5 years of their tapestry practice. Elaine and Alan Davies generously support the award in memory of their mother, Irene Davies, a tapestry enthusiast and avid supporter of the ATW. And every time these awards are shown with the finalists, it's just such a wonderful experience. But tonight we come together for the first of our international speaker series. We're very pleased to be joined by Caron Penney and Katharine Swailes of Atelier Weftfaced, based in the UK. Caron and Katharine are tapestry weavers who have been selected as finalists in the Kate Derum Award in 2017 and 2019. In 2013, Caron Penney established Atelier Weftfaced, a small atelier in the heart of Sussex, keeping the craft of hand-woven tapestry and handcrafted costume thriving. Together with master weaver and costumier Katharine Swailes, the Weftfaced weavers have a background in contemporary and traditional textiles, while sharing a special interest in the fine arts. Caron is a master tapestry weaver. She studied at Middlesex University and has worked in textile production for over 20 years. She is both an artisanal weaver and an artist and has manufactured the work of artists from Tracy Emin to Martin Creed. In her tapestries, Penney uses both references to street architecture and structural comparisons between the wharf and the Weft and the gridded road systems in New York, and responds to the ebb and flow of the daily migration across the city. Construction and materials are central to Katharine's wall-based and sculptural hand-woven tapestries. She investigates the conceptual underpinning of the weaving process using a looping sequence and a cross sequence of embellishments with a minimal palette. In 2019, Swales showed her series The Constellations at Collect and was shortlisted for the Cordis Prize for her work Le Brico de Broc, shown at London Art Fair in January 2020. Now, before we start, if you'd like to ask a question during the talk, please send them through by clicking the Q&A button. We will try and answer as many of your questions as possible at the end of the lecture. Now, just imagine that if you were at the workshop, you would be gathering in your seats, excited to have the lecture start. Would you please join me in warmly welcoming Caron Penney and Katharine Swailes? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Caron Penney and this is Katharine Swailes, and we're calling, as it were, from our studio in West Sussex, and so these are our looms that you can see behind us, and I'll go straight to Katharine's talk, which is, I'm sorry. So I'm just going to bring that up for you all to see, hopefully. Okay, thank you, Caron. So I'm an artist, a master weaver and a costume maker. This year I've
mostly been an artist, so it's been a slightly different year. But one of the main inspirations to my artwork over the last few years has been this piece of textiles. And it's almost 1,000 years old. It's pre-Columbian. It's not a tapestry, it's a double cloth, but it's that sort of the age that interests me and the time that we all take in weaving. So sort of it's the path of myself as a weaver and reflecting on the paths of weavers that have gone before me. This is a piece of textiles that we house in the studio. So I don't look at it in a museum. I can get it out of its special drawer where it sees no light, because it's sort of, part of it's sort of quite terrifying as well. How long does something last? And you are aware that every time you get it out and look at it, that is moments shorter in its lifetime. And with this age, I think that's something that I reflect on. And I don't intentionally put it into my own work, but everything I make, I feel I'm making as if it might too last 1,000 years. So the series I'll talk about today is the Glyphs and Loops series, which has really evolved through observing that piece of textiles. And it's a modular system. It's woven using a supplementary weft. And the other great influence to my work is the materials and the fibres themselves. And the bobbins you see here are full of a cotton tape. It's a Japanese yarn and it's got a splatter print. It's not suitable for tapestry. If I used it to create a weft face as a fibre, it would be destroyed. So I first saw this fibre in 2008 and I bought a small amount and pondered on it over a number of years. And the combination of the pre-Columbian textiles and this fibre led me to investigate supplementary weft systems. And I came up with these supplementary weft systems, which were, one was looping and one was a tight crossing system. And it reflected a duality in myself, of my life, of humanity's duality. And so the looping is expressive and loose, and the crossing is organized and repetitious. And one of the things that's important is that it's meditative to weave. It's the repetition of the process and taking out all of the things that might interfere with the process of my hands moving over the warp. So I don't put any slitting into my work, which you've traditionally found in tapestry, and you would then sew that up, because that's taking my mind out of my place of meditation. This work is the calendar of the sun and the moon. Again, it's a double thing, there's a duality. The pre-Columbians had a calendar for the sun and the moon, but in contemporary life, we work from one calendar. And this piece is 7 days a week. And it represented my life at the time. I worked for 3 days a week, and that was organised and to a pattern, and you perform in a certain way. And the lower panels are the looping, which is sort of the expressive, exploratory end of the week, as it were. So I was lucky, I had four days for looping and 3 days for organisation and sort of looking carefully. And you'll notice that it's all set in, it's not a frame, it's part of the object, it's part of the art object. And it's a reflection on textiles and architecture, that those early technologies of how they sort of started at the same time. And it's about our sort of protection as humanity. I mean, I can't imagine how any of us would exist without textiles or clothing or going to bed at night under the comfort of a duvet. So it's sort of, it's just makes me really sort of think about humanity and our path and where we've come from and how long it's taken and how long it took people to weave these pieces of work. As a studio weaver, you need to produce work quickly to make it cost effective and meet timelines that a client might have. So with these works, I did the opposite. The looping panels that you saw in the previous piece, those small looping panels, each one is 10 centimetres square, and that is around 3 days of weaving for me. So that bottom section took 12 days, and it's only 42 centimetres wide and 27 centimetres high. So these pieces of work were months in the making. This is the 4 seasons, and I was interested that, you know, with the looping, if you put a square within a looped panel, that it would behave differently at the top and the bottom. And there was what I hadn't anticipated was the complexity of joining these two techniques together. So what might have taken 5 or 6 days to weave probably took 10 to 15. Again, this piece is made up of 4 modules that are 17 centimetres square. And so the piece is about 42 centimetres square, I think, in total. Again, with the bespoke structure that it's housed in. And it's the gift of the lighting when I displayed them at the Saatchi Gallery that sort of brought an extra element. It's great to get your work out into the world. And so it stops being yours and it becomes something else. And in the Saatchi Gallery, the lighting gave the work these incredible shadows that reflect the architectural thinking that I had while I was creating the work. So you can see it here going round, and it gives an extra depth. The shadow lines were incredibly important to me, the double framing and this very small gap between the tapestry and the frame. I wanted that sort of slight inaccuracy in the weaving to be exploited, that I didn't want it hidden. I wanted it very much on show. And again, just to reflect back that these are the materials that I use. They're loaded onto wood bobbins. I use brass tip bobbins and wood bobbins. I prefer the wood bobbins when I'm weaving with linen and cotton. And this is just a good close-up detail, so you can see the glyphs. I use various settings. I use a setting between 5 ends to the centimetre and 3.5 ends to the centimetre. I think these pieces are on about 4 ends to the centimetre, and the glyphs are woven over 2 warps. So that can vary as well. I wanted very few changes, but I wanted nothing to be exactly the same. And this is the loom that most of these pieces have been woven on. It's a small travelling loom that will fit in the back of my car. So it travels from the studio to home, on holiday, wherever. It's life's a bit quieter this year, work-wise. So I'm more focused every day in the studio, whereas in previous years you might have a week where you're out of the studio for 4 days and only in the studio for 2 days. So it's sort of, which means actually you can just see over my shoulder a larger piece of looping rather than the small pieces. I foolishly decided I'd weave something 90 centimetres by 90 centimetres, and I am in sight of the end, but I'm not quite sure when that's going to happen. And that's just a close-up of, so you can begin to see how the supplementary Weft system works. And this is quite an early piece, glyph piece, and it again, it's the yarn that makes the work in a way. I don't place the print, it randomly comes out, so each piece is very different. This is quite open, it's 4.5 ends to the centimetre. I think it's a very fine weave, this one, but the cross is made over 4 warps instead of 2 warps. Again, it just happens that sometimes the print is much denser and sometimes it is lighter, so the end result really varies. And these works will be displayed in Arundel over the summer. Well, some of them will be, some of them have already found new homes, but I have a selection to go from. I'll now hand over to Caron.
Thank you. Oh, I went the wrong way. So I'm going to essentially, you can see there, I've sort of put up that I'm an artist, master weaver and educator, and I'm going to concentrate mainly on myself as an artist like Catherine has, and then we'll come together and talk about Atelier Weftfaced at the end. So I have a sort of fascination with repeat pattern and repetition and rhythm and essentially the grid. So I'm going to sort of investigate that now. And this picture that you're looking at is of Manhattan. And so I went to Manhattan repetitively over about 12 years and took lots of photographs from quite lofty hotel rooms, looking, down both into the architecture and also into the streets and avenues. And I became quite interested and obsessed with this repetition that you see from this, it's all man-made architecture, obviously, and the urban landscape. And so here I've put 2 photographs together at slightly different perspectives. So you're getting that, real feel of repetition, rhythm and pattern that I'm becoming obsessed with and becoming sort of interested in, and that's playing a part within my work. And so if I take you to the next slide, the images on the far side are of an actual intersection. So now I'm sort of getting, I suppose, more detailed and looking at specific areas and places within Manhattan. But what became obvious to me while I was taking all of these photographs was the migration of traffic. And so, our daily lives, if you're just a voyeur watching everything that's happening below you, you can sort of see that people are obviously, in your mind, you're believing anyway, that people are going to work and coming back or picking up their children or whatever it may be. There's this routine that's going on every day and this daily migration across the city, and that makes essentially the city work. But also that we're held, we're stopped and we're allowed to go when the lights change and all those sorts of things. But this area that I'm looking at here is an intersection, and I like to play with layers in my work. And so the intersection is a metaphor for, say, maybe it being a decision-making place, a place where quite literally you're thinking about going left, right or straight on. But also, it could be a cross-junction. It could be a cross-junction in your life, whether you're going to carry on in the direction you're going in or change direction. And I was also looking at all the lovely little lines, which are the pedestrian crossings, obviously, that around those images, and started to go to my sketchbook. I love squared paper, and so always work on squared paper. But also actually just linking into that theme, the intersection is obviously part of the streets and the avenues, which then when you start to broaden that out, and I did a little bit of research to find out that, you know, this is a gridiron, and a gridiron is a very old road system, which is essentially a grid. And we, as weavers, also work with the grid. So we have our warp and our weft. And so there was lots of layers there as well that were sort of suddenly sort of coming together for me when I was sort of trying to, you know, resolve some of the photography that I'd taken and trying to work where I was going to lead to and how it was going to inspire my tapestries. And so what you're literally looking at in the sketchbook is me working with pencil and gold gouache and making a representation, an abstract representation of all the things I've just said. And I'm layering over the top these sort of lines, which are like a pedestrian crossing. I'm working in gold because it's gold gouache, as I say, because gold has significance in tapestries in the sense of historically, you know, the more gold you had in your tapestry, the more wealthy you are and the more status you had. And so I've started to use the gilt gold thread in the tapestry as well. And I'm laying those layers over the top because of, you know, sort of that power of gold over the top of a decision-making, you know, cross section, intersection, let's say. And so that's my theory to my work. But obviously, if the viewer, if the audience comes along and says that I enjoy the pattern and the colours, I'm not particularly worried about that either. So this is the weaving of it. I'm not literally depicting you know, from my sketchbook in the same way as I might if I was working as a master weaver and I was working with an original painting, which was sort of an artist's, and I was rendering that into tapestry where I would be making a faithful interpretation of that painting. What I am doing here is I'm just, I've got 5 grey walls that I use, and they, you know, obviously range from light to dark, and these are just blocked in colours. They aren't blended in any way, so I'm not mixing the colours together. And then the gold is placed in layers as well, and there's a lot of slits. So you're seeing here also me cutting the tapestry off. It's 80 centimetres by 40 centimetres, and you can see me finishing in the top corner there. So this is this particular tapestry complete. It's in a very synthetic aluminium frame, and I don't use a selvage, which is like a hem. I like the rawness of the tapestry on show, and it's I suppose I like the simplicity and the sort of pared back simplicity to the work, which is what I try to sort of put through into my tapestries. So here's a detail, and you can see the gilt gold, which is a really hard yarn to work with in the sense of literally it's hard. Whereas of course the wool is soft and pliable and easier, much easier to work with. There's a lot of tension issues when you're working in these small blocks, making sure you're not pulling the lines or changing things structurally within the grid system of a tapestry. And so I have also used the warp thread as a weft thread to hold that grid together. And I made a few smaller pieces to complement the larger piece, and they actually came first, and they're in slightly different colour formations. And I'm showing this body of work partly because it was pieces like this which I put forward to the Kate Derum Prize, and previously obviously, and so there's that link through. But also I am showing them currently right now in the UK, in London, at the Soshiro Gallery for an exhibition called Crafting a Difference, which has been digital up until very recently, when it's now open to the public. And so you can make, you have to make an appointment, but you can go along and see this wonderful exhibition. There's loads of amazing work in it. So if you are in London, or can get to London now, please do go and see it. It ends at the end of April, so you haven't got long. And so I also make other types of work. So sometimes I put text into my work. This is just one representation of that. Again, I'm using the gold thread for the same reasons, but everything is very technically worked out. So the number of rows of weaving is precision counted, and the number of warps are obviously exactly the same all the way along, so that there's this regularity to the work. And also the background is counted, so it's a number system all the time, and actually I'm using a number system also with the other pieces that I showed you. So I quite enjoy that sort of technical side of the weaving. So we both dye our walls when Catherine's using one. She dyes it. We do that ourselves. We do it from our studio, and we do everything in this space together. We don't weave on each other's personal tapestries or design each other's personal stuff. That's separate. But when we come together for the atelier, we do lots of things together and support each other. So whether it's like doing this, which is winding our yarn off, or that's my wonderful grey palette of wools, and in the top corner you can see my cotton grey warp, and the other side is the gilt gold thread that I use. I sometimes use other colours, by the way, but not actually that many. I do like to restrict myself painfully to these very limited colours that I use for my own tapestries. And this is a new set of pieces that I'm working on. One of them is here, which is just in the throes of being woven, and the other one you can see on the screen parts of it. I'm not quite showing you it all, because hopefully it's going to be in an exhibition in June later this year. And so we're going to now explain a little bit about Atelier Weftfaced, and we have 3 aspects to it. And so we have the tapestry weaving, which Catherine and I come together on, and that involves us. I should probably give you a bit of background to that, because Catherine and I have both worked in professional tapestry studios in the past, and we have rendered paintings by anyone from Tracy Emin to John Hubbard to Bill Jacklin to Gillian Ayres to Basil Beattie and Emma Biggs and Matt Collins, Catherine that is. And so we've got quite, and many other artists that we can't remember. So we do this, we've done this previously, and generally speaking, we've got some sort of original image that we're translating into tapestry. So we currently carry on and do that, but we are working with mainly one artist, which we'll come to in just a second. But also, Catherine was a costumier originally before she came to tapestry.
Yes.
And so we do the bespoke costume making.
Yeah.
And then I'm an educator, so I teach. But all of these elements we help each other with. It's just the 2 of us in the studio. So we have no assistants or anyone else around. And so that's us working on Martin Creed's tapestry. So as I say, when we come to work on a commission for an artist, this is us working together. And we wanted to just explain a little bit about the tapestries that we made for Martin Creed, because he is the main artist that we work for. We will work with any other artist, but we mainly work with Martin.
Well, it's that combination of, we want to create our own work. So you sort of, you have, there's only so much time in a week, so we've been working with Martin's for a number of years, I think, and the costume, I think I started in 2018. Yeah. We've been working with Martin since 2014.
Yeah, and so this, where we have previously worked with an original painting, or something that we're rendering into, then making into a tapestry. With Martin, what we do is there is no original. This is the original artwork. And so he came to us and wanted to know so much about tapestry weaving, which is such a wonderful way of working. And he wanted to, investigate the medium of tapestry. And so he would ask us simple questions for a start, is sort of like, what's the maximum size that you can weave a tapestry on your loom? And one of the looms, which is actually the wooden one that's behind me, which is a Leclerc, the maximum weaving width is 1.44 meters. And so having got that, for instance, that dimension, then this tapestry that we're looking at here is 1.44 meters by 1.44 meters. And then we'd have long discussions about the dyes and how you do it and all those sorts of things, but also which dyes that you use. And so we came up with this 16 colours because they are the pure dye stock. So they've not been mixed at all, not been changed in any way. So we had 16 colours. 16 colours over 1.44 meters means the stripes will be 9 centimetres. And so, that's a simple discussion in a way that took some time to get to. And then we would weave this tapestry for him and dye all the yarn and dye it at 1% so that it's just all the same value. And then this is another piece that we've made. So that's the same 16 colours in a different rotation. And I should have said, with these ones, we've woven, I can't remember, I think it's about 4 or 5, and which I should have checked, but I haven't. And different rotations of colour, so it's not always the same.
The same 16.
Same 16, but different sequence. And then this is a different sequence, but we've woven it a row, 16 rows of those 16 colours on one pass, sorry, and then 2 passes, 16 colours, and 3 passes, which is a row of weaving. A pass is a row of weaving. So 3 passes, 16 colours, 4 passes, 16 colours, and it goes on. And we had to do samples.
Yes, on this one, we needed to weave a sample to find out how square. So I think the loom actually has about a 70 centimetre weaving width on it, but you have the rotation that's also going to dictate some of the parameters. So we had to weave a sample strip of about 6 centimetres wide, I think it was, and it went up to, I think, 6 rotations, which made 58 centimetres. If we'd gone to 7 rotations, it would have gone above the 70 centimetre loom width. So we went down to the
So it's the limitations of the loom that dictated the size of the piece, which is always the case.
Yes. Yeah.
And so this is a same larger tapestry, 1.44 meters by 1.44 meters, but different sequence of colours, same 16 colours, just differently placed, as it were. And so this is at the Peter Lund Gallery. It's in 2016. And the work number, by the way, is how Martin Creed titles his work. So that's the title for all of, in every artwork is a different number, obviously. And so there is also another piece there on the wall, which is a painting by Martin Creed. So it's not a tapestry. And Catherine's going to give you a little bit more insight into the costume making.
So this was for a show called Amigos. It was in Santander in 2019. And Martin, this show of Martin's, there were wall paintings, but there were also performers. They were musicians and singers. So for every day that the show was open, there would be 3 performers at any time performing. So that meant we needed 12 performers to cover the entire show, so that everybody could have a day off, and they were really long days as well. And the costumes, so for the 12 costume makers, we actually ended up needing to make about 68 pieces. And the pieces consisted of skirts, trousers, vests, and some of the skirt pieces, as you can see, the gentleman here is wearing a skirt as a sort of cape cum hat. So they're sort of multifunctional. The button trousers are made from, well, I think all the costumes that are sort of constructed from the start are made from rectangles or squares of fabric, and no piece of fabric is taken away and no piece of fabric is joined. It's just the use of slits, buttonholes and buttons to form and shape them. The skirt in the middle that you can see, the stripes, that is a Velcro skirt. And so that actually is 16 colours of Velcro as well. And that was the supply of coloured Velcro that we could get at the time we were making the outfits and what the supplier had. So again, the parameters come from various different directions. The hats that are worn, they're made from silk organza, and again, they're not a traditional. There's a concept. They're like the carrier bags that you might have got from a corner shop, and the colour choices, again, they're not sort of just the colours of the organza I could get. There had to be a bag that existed with the colourway. And we ended up making, I think, about 17 hats. Some of them were plain and some of them were striped, and they were constructed using an overlocker. The shoes weren't provided by us, they were made by a bespoke shoemaker. So again, another skilled craftsperson. Martin works with a lot of skilled crafts makers to produce the work.
Yeah.
And again here, it's not also, I also helped Martin with his costume as well. Here you can see him wearing a tie of ties, which is a tie made of 7 different ties, and he wanted it to function as a tie would. And you sort of, there are boundaries, but there are discoveries as well. I've made, I think, 3 sets of the tie of ties, and some of them are worn as capes, and you can't really see, but there is one being worn as a cape on the other side. But there are layers. Again, she's wearing a button vest, button trousers, a tie cape, and that is a Velcro brace that goes over the top. So all these elements are thought of and evolve separately, and then it's sort of, you know, each wearer finds their way of, and it's sort of their expression of how it's worn. So it's very individual. And when they're performing, it's not stationary. The exhibition space was probably the size of 2 or 3 tennis courts, and they would be running. It's all sort of orchestrated and choreographed. The music goes in different rotations, and so they run up while the gallery while they're playing. They go in the lifts. It was sort of, it filled the space. It was sort of, you were filling the space with noise and activity and everything on the walls as well. I forgot to put in a slide of the staff all had uniforms, and those were decorated by Martin with paint, much as he would one of his paintings. They all came in one day wearing their uniforms, a big sort of like a tent, a spray tan tent, huge, that would accommodate 30 people, was set up, and they got bottles of paint and they decorated all their costumes while the staff were wearing them. So everyone was involved, and it was so positive and such a sort of amazing experience, and just expanded really, I felt, what an exhibition could be.
Yeah. And just in case, I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but that is Martin Creed in that shot.
Yeah.
And the guitar is also a bespoke guitar, which he will have had made, you know, by a professional.
That was for 2018.
Yeah, for an exhibition initially, and then he is a musician. You can see him mic'd up there, so he's part of this performance as well.
So he wrote the music.
Yeah, and he wrote the music. Yeah. And we absolutely love working with him. And actually, one of the things that we forgot to mention was where we had the very fine stripes in the tapestry that increased in number. We found that we were working very much when we were working on that. Because we made quite a big one as well. We made a smaller one and then we made a much bigger one, and we had to make the bigger one together. So we were working on it at the same time, and we found that we were sort of rhythmically having to move around the tapestry to keep the, you know, so that the tension was always correct. Because if we just stayed on one side and just did our individual sort of side of that larger tapestry, you know, the tension on the line could differ, because you know, each weaver has a different tension. And so we got into this sort of very rhythmic moving around, and almost like a dance.
So it was a discussion with Martin, wasn't it, that the comparison of this, the weaving and the music and the working together, and just sort of, you know, we don't do anything alone in life, really. That it's
always a support.
There's always collaboration. You always need help.
And so it's been an absolute pleasure to work with Martin Creed. And he's also been working with us all the way through the lockdown, and you make individual pieces of costume for him as well, which we've thoroughly enjoyed. And so just one very last thing, which is that the other part of Atelier Weftfaced is the education, and so which is what I tend to have more influence on that. And I've been teaching for about 20 years now, which is a dreadful thing to say. And so in those 20 years, I generally would have worked on small, short courses, face-to-face workshops, which have been through, you know, in London and in the south of England. And so, of course, all that's changed. So now we're on Zoom, one of the wonderful things about that is being able to connect with so many people from outside of the UK. I mean, not that I don't mind, you know, obviously connecting with lots of people inside the UK, but it's a global network of students now, which is been absolutely wonderful and a change that we've embraced. And so I just thought I'd mention that in case anybody wanted to consider starting to weave tapestry. We basically teach from beginners upwards. And these are just some of the samples that help me in doing that, and just also to show that I do sometimes work in colour. So I think this is our final slide. If you wanted to get in touch with us, there's our website, and also these are some of the exhibitions that our personal work will be involved in. So as I said, Crafting a Difference until the end of April. And then there is an exhibition called Artifact, which is at Chelsea Harbour, which will be in June. And an exhibition which is nearer to us in Arundel, which is at Gallery 57, July and August. So I think that's around it. Should I just? Yes, we've got one more.
The last, and this is a different work from me. As Karen said, I dye wool as well, and this work is in Crafting a Difference at Soshiro in London. Just give a shout out. It was curated by Brian Kennedy, and we're exhibiting with Cavaliero Finn, and that's on until the end of April. And it's a exhibition that you can actually go and visit if you're in the London area.
Yeah. So this is a different way that Catherine works. Yeah, yes, so she does the glyphs and loops, but you also do the colour-filled tapestries.
Yeah. So it's a conceptual, similar sort of approach. Yeah.
So Caroline, I think we're probably ready for you to come back, and I'll just share my screen so that I've got to remember how to do this. I'm sorry.
Well, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you both Caron and Katharine, for your generosity in sharing so much about your practices and your work together, and such wonderful insights you've given us about both theory and practice. I think we're delighted to hear from you about those and your many experiences. I will now start a few questions as they're coming through, but please, in the audience, please pop some questions in. First of all, I'd be quite interested to hear from you separately as to what you love about working with the other person in your team.
I'm not, yes, I wasn't expecting that question. I don't know, we're so used to it now because we've been working together for probably nearly 20 years, as it were. And perhaps it's that you know what the other is doing, and our skill bases, we've got different skill bases, but they support each other because really they're both in the textile world. So sort of the costume, Caron knows enough to assist me and not be frightened of what I'm asking her to do, and have the skill base to do it, even though she doesn't know she's got that skill base. And I think it's the other way round with the sort of the teaching. I am not a natural teacher, but I can certainly assist Caron in her endeavours with teaching.
Yeah, so
sort of we make a unit in the end that functions really quite well.
I think that we always find that we naturally find the person who wants to lead whatever project it is, and there's no sort of like concern about that. And so we can both sit, you know, as the leader or as the support act, as it were, quite happily. And that makes, you know, working together, I mean, I'm not suggesting that this is blissful all the time, but, you know, it certainly helps. Good communication obviously helps.
Yes.
And we just like to have our own studio, having worked in a situation like the ATW where you're working with teams and, you know, all working together on one project, which I, you know, used to absolutely love, don't get me wrong, but now having left that situation and now we're just the two of us, it does allow for you to, I suppose, for a start, work on your own work, have that time and space and energy for it, which I never really did when I worked, you know, at a different studio. So it's all those sorts of elements sort of come into play, I think.
Yeah, I think we do both have an ambition to create our own work, and I suppose over the years we've been working towards that in a way, but sort of our own work is very separate and very different, and we sort of in different rooms almost when we're working in that way, but we jointly somehow we can work towards that with the atelier work.
Yeah, we've got quite a big space here. We're in a small corner of it at the moment, but you know, we can, you know, when you're doing your costume making, you're in a completely different room to me, so she can, you know, you can be very private and quiet, and I can be in here weaving. So there's quite, you know, there's distance between us as well.
And as we all know, last year has been so unusual for everyone, and we think of you sort of with still lots of lockdown issues. How have you reacted to opportunities or not during the last year, particularly?
I mean, I think I started the year, last March, I think we both sat down and said, shouldn't they just lock down for a year? And I don't really in my head think that would happen at the time. So sort of there's been a rolling expectation that everything might end and there might be this so-called going back to normal, whatever that was. But that hasn't happened. So over the time, we've been able to do more and more, and have become quite focused on my own work. Certainly, and opportunities have come up, like working with Atelier Weftfaced and the Show at So Shiro and Collect, and they went on as an online activity, and that gave great focus. And so those were fantastic events to keep going and keep things lively. And as a maker, kept me thinking and working hard. So I think I've probably worked harder this year than I have.
Yeah, I mean, the first lockdown we were sort of restricted a bit because we were we've moved studios in lockdown, so we were in a smaller studio and we felt we couldn't really go in to that studio, so we worked from home for the first lockdown in the UK, and then everything opened up again, and then we obviously have had various other lockdowns since, and in the interim we moved into this much larger space, which has been wonderful. I mean, it's just hugely brilliant, and so, but the first one, so we were quite small, located, and now we've been coming up here every day through the second lockdown because we're quite close, and we're a bubble, so we can work together, and it's allowed us to really concentrate, I think, much more on our own individual pursuits, our own individual work, whereas other things always come in and you sort of always put your own artistic endeavours slightly to one side. But during this period of lockdown, we've been able to really concentrate on making our individual tapestry, and for me, Zoom teaching, and Catherine's been doing some costume for Martin. So we found it perfectly okay. We're quite isolated anyway, so we
filled the time.
We enjoyed it.
We filled the time, and I think what I find happens is I start giving myself deadlines, and you sort of think, why are you giving yourself such hard deadlines? When I'm in control, I could take my foot off the pedal a bit, but in fact the deadlines seem to be getting harder and harder.
Probably happens to many. Now, we'll have time for a couple more questions. So if there's any in the audience that want to send through, we have one from Jilly Edwards. Do you find working in the different areas helps to keep you fresh?
Yes, it does. It gives you a different pace. I like moving on to the costume because it's more active, it's physical in a different way. Tapestry weaving is actually sort of very physical, but in a very controlled way, and the costume just sort of, and I think Caron with the teaching.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I sort of jump from weaving samples for students, and sort of come up devising new courses and things, to working on my own work. And I've actually been able to do that a lot more than I even would in a normal, outside of lockdown. It's really given you a completely different perspective, which I think is a really positive thing. And if there's anything positive to come out of it, that is it, I think. So coming in, and also I would argue that working on somebody else's work gives you a fresh perspective as well. I mean, having done that all my life, worked with other artists and seen tapestry from a different perspective because I've had to say, render somebody else's image into tapestry. I think that both pushes your skill level up, because you're having to really engage with things that maybe within your own artistic practice you would never engage with, and so it really does, make you a better weaver, and also gives you that fresh perspective, takes you away from the narrowness of your work,
gives you challenges you wouldn't explore.
It's
the interaction of somebody else.
Definitely.
And we have a question here from, and if I get the name wrong, apologies. Agle Miguel says, thanks a lot for this great presentation. I wonder what pushes you to do your own dyeing.
Oh, it's not a push, actually. It's a
love of colour.
And that sort of creating colour, you dye something and you sort of think, well, you have sort of a control and an exploration. You can explore the colour It's like having a box of watercolor paints. If you think how fluid and how dynamic that can be, well, you can have the same with colouring your yarn, whereas rather than going to a shop where you would buy your yarn, there's a fixed range. But when I start weaving on a project, I'll start with something I've already got in stock, and I'll look at it and I'll dye. And the more I dye this family of yarns. So a series of work, like the piece I've got of Crafting a Difference, only comes into existence with the dyeing, as it were, and sort of one dye batch informing the next. So it's very much part of the artwork.
I think, and also the process of dyeing, it's like alchemy. You know, you start with this wool hank, which is, beautiful in itself, but you put it in and it slowly changes color, and you can and it's such an amazing, I just love dyeing yarn, because I always have, and I absolutely love color, and I love the way you can just change the color ever so slightly by just adding the smallest amounts of another color into the recipe, and then you're off onto another track, and it's infinite the amount of color that you can use, and then using that with the technique of blending and hatching, you can create it's such incredible subtlety within tapestry. It's just amazing. And I think if you leave out dyeing as part of the process of weaving, then you're missing a whole trick.
Well, that's good news for all those keen dyers out there that really have so many opportunities. I'd like to, with a few questions that have been coming in about, I suppose, what led you to begin the atelier, and also, has it ended up being what you expected? And then yes, perhaps if you can elaborate on that.
Initially, out of necessity, I left a previous job, and slightly suddenly, and so I was left sort of deciding which route to take, and I did just immediately think that I would set up my own studio and work from there, and that I could work with artists, because I was running the studio that I left, and managing to acquire the commissions. So I felt that I could continue to do that myself as an individual. And I'm quite resourceful, and set my website up in a couple of weeks, and got in touch with numerous people I worked with in the past, and was able to just actually started on a tapestry with Gillian Ayres and the Alan Cresteya Gallery, and a campaign for wool was my first commission, and I literally wove that tapestry in my home in the back bedroom, and because I had no studio, so I started to dye, and I dyed all the walls, from home, and just kept going, really, because it was a certain necessity, in the sense of paying your bills and needing to just keep going, and that was the thing I knew the most. That was part of me, so. And I started that, and I was a teacher as well, so I obviously carried on, was able to get some positions with the teaching, which was all just self-employed, and the business grew from there, and I've loved it ever since.
One of the things that took longest to establish was a suitable studio space.
Yeah, that did take some time.
So, and then we found a wonderful studio space at the Mill Studio, which we were at very happily, but I don't think we realised quite how much we'd grown until we moved. We've moved from one room that is the same size as this room, but we've got another 2 rooms now, and within hours of moving in, we'd filled the space. So I think that you sort of so tapestry, it takes up space, it's storage. a lot of sort of pop-up
looms are big as well.
You know, a lot of businesses now are computer driven, and you might have products, but you might never see them. It might be a case of importing and supplying out. But with something as physical as tapestry, I mean, as you know, the ATW, you need space and storage and enough space to actually make.
Yeah.
So it's
so we've got an 8-foot Shannock and a
4-foot Shannock loom,
4-foot Shannock and a 5-foot Leclerc. So they're all our looms, and then we've got the smaller looms as well, which is like this smaller loom. You've got a whole sewing room,
and storage.
You've got all the teaching equipment. You know, we were all in one room. It was literally all in one room, and so we got a bit too big for it, really. And coming here is just, you know, we can spread out and suddenly realise you've got all this space that you can use.
Sounds like you have a great setup. Now we're nearly out of time, so I think one last question. We would love to know what projects are coming next for you, if you can tell us.
Well, I've got in my own work, there's the piece on the loom behind me, which I hope to finish this summer, and so it's sort of ongoing. The loops and the glyphs and loops series. I've got another part that I'm nearly finished. So I've got a couple of large projects that I hope to finish over the next 6 months. I'm hoping to be doing a project that involves dyeing and the environment of the Barlavington estate here in West Sussex, to sort of, I'm hoping that something will happen this year to do with that.
So we've got the 3 exhibitions that we spoke about, of which, you know, I'm in the making at the moment, one of them. And I've been working on a project now for some time, which is complete, but I haven't been able to exhibit it because the exhibition's been deferred to 2022.
Due to COVID.
Due to COVID. And that's quite a big thing for me. And I've managed to get funding from the Arts Council and all sorts of things, but I'm not allowed to release what it is, unfortunately. But it will be early in 2022 that I'll be able to, well, hopefully before then, but, you know, really get to grips with telling everyone about that. But so there's been, we're making a lot of tapestry. We always have an ongoing project with Martin Creed in the sense of the costume, but there may also be other tapestries in the pipeline in the future.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have been blessed with hearing about your individual and your collaborative practices. I think everyone who is listening tonight, I'm sure, has just thoroughly enjoyed hearing about what you're up to, and we wish you all the best for the future. But before we go, I think I'd also just like to mention that if you want to learn more about these 2 awards, the Kate Derum Award and the Irene Davies Emerging Artist Award for Small Tapestries, for this year, entries for these awards will open on June the 25th, so not that far off, and close on August the 9th. So hoping that all those weavers out there are thinking of projects in which to apply. It's an exciting, and we look forward to the exhibition later. And before I thank you again, I'd like to thank everyone who's attended. And clearly we've got some wonderful reach with over 80 people have been online, and that's just wonderful. And to have you both there zooming into us, we really do think it's just a wonderful thing to happen, and the reach is just broader, and we're loving to hear from you.
We just wanted to thank you, Caroline, and also the Australian Tapestry Workshop for hosting this event, and all the other events that you're doing. This international speakers. We're thrilled to have been asked.
Yes,
thank you very much for involving us.
That's great. Well, it has been quite a special treat for us tonight, and we thank you both, and we wish you all the best for the future. And thank you to everyone that is out there and keep an eye on the website for all the amazing exhibitions and projects and events that will take place, and probably live real ones too in Australia now. So thanks again and appreciate your time. Well done. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.